Hi, I am Professor Amitav Banerjee. I am an epidemiologist who had served in the armed forces and then subsequently as professor in a teaching institution in Pune, India. I have been following and analyzing the COVID pandemic. Based on that, I had written a book also, COVID Pandemic, a Third Eye. After writing this book and then studying this, I started tracing because after this pandemic is over or it is being drawn out, uh, before immediately we are having apprehensions of future pandemics. So I thought let us trace the history of pandemics, and the topic I will discuss today is pandemics, past, present, and future pandemics, particularly from the point of view of India. So, as we know, since recorded history, humans have always faced and feared infectious diseases, which have created great havoc and disruptions in the past, particularly before the antibiotic era and advances in modern medicine. These were actually more dramatic and more devastating in the early, before the medical technology had advanced. So I will just see whether we really have to fear future pandemics as we had faced in the past. Worldwide, from recorded history and from fossils, it is evident that major scourges like plague, typhus, smallpox, cholera, yellow fever, influenza, scarlet fever, malaria, diphtheria, polio, and other infectious diseases have attacked whole populations, causing dreadful epidemics. An epidemic which gets unchecked has the potential of spreading to large geographical areas across many countries. We call it a pandemic then. Pandemic down the ages have disrupted human progress and brought great misery and devastation in its wake. Vast stretches of Europe were decimated by the plague between the 14th and 17th centuries. Smallpox and other diseases ravaged and destroyed Aztec and Inca civilizations in Latin America in the 16th century, killing a large number of those who fell sick. Military history, stretching back to the Middle Ages and the ancient world, is replete with accounts of armies which got depleted and defeated by pestilence and infections before facing the human enemy. Epidemics have often foiled the best laid plans of kings, their military leaders, and their advisors. Now, after the Second World War, there are great paradigm shift in pandemics, particularly in the Western countries. And the West developed much faster than the East, many parts of which are still lagging behind. Consequently, many infectious diseases cease to pose major public health threat. Over the years, the medical establishment in the West, which is the bellwether of the rest of the world, has lost interest and familiarity with these diseases, relegating them to the group of neglected tropical diseases. Since the West stopped having these problems with development, they got relegated. And what happened as a consequence? Most of the Western experts are, as on today, are unfamiliar with communicable diseases, and they have raised the panic button rather fast. This has dropped the threshold to press the panic button for a pandemic lower in the West, and once pressed, the whole world goes into panic in spite of the fact that the developing world may be facing far greater public health hazards from the neglected tropical diseases ignored by the West. I'll be subsequently bringing out the data that we are in the present, past, present, and future. Past, we had major pandemics before the antibiotic era, before we could understand. But present, the West is having minimum pandemics, and the Eastern countries, the developing countries, the Asian and African, many countries, they are having perpetual pandemics, which are silent pandemics, which are not hyped, which do not come in the news, which are neglected by the Western experts, and the other experts take the cue from the Western experts. So these are the neglected pandemics which are hidden, which are far greater morbidity and mortality than imagined future pandemics. Simulations and modeling. What is the future of pandemics? Now, future of pandemics are mostly simulations and modelings. Have opened the scope of future pandemic predictions and preparations driven by the experts, whom I call them mouse click epidemiologists or laptop epidemiologists, who do not go to the field, but by making the simulations, they create panic in the particularly from the West and turning a Nelson's eye to the existing public health scourges, which still is the lot of majority of the world population living in poor countries of Asia and Africa. Why the Western scientific community lost interest in the so-called neglected tropical diseases? How this has come about, this paradigm shift? Priorities in medical research and development have been dictated by power dynamics down the ages. It is power dynamics which defines a pandemic. It is power dynamics which gives the research and development resources for the diseases of their choice, neglecting the actual diseases which may be killing more because there are no, perhaps other interest groups are there. The neglected tropical diseases that continue to be major public health problems in the developing countries plagued Europe and America between the 17th and 19th centuries. When it plagued the Western hemisphere, it got its attention. Malaria was a problem in the West right up to the 20th century. Plague, typhoid, cholera, tuberculosis, typhus, and smallpox were the major health hazards in the region in the Victorian period. Western doctors, particularly those serving in the British colonies, took keen interest in these now neglected diseases throughout this period. This was driven by two motives. First, they were endemic in their own countries, and secondly, due to military necessity, as the colonial armies, civil servants, and their families were exposed to these diseases in alien lands. In fact, tropical medicine originated. Mostly the tropical medicine discipline deals with these pandemics, communicable diseases. In fact, tropical medicine originated as a byproduct of the British Empire or British Raj, as we call it in India. As a consequence, the rise and fall of tropical medicine coincided with the rise and fall of the Raj. The field flourished as a result of the interest of the colonial rulers, who had a vested interest in preserving the health of the British personnel, both during their stay on foreign soil and also following their return to Britain. The discipline of tropical medicine drew its knowledge and competence from varied fields such as public health, hygiene, travel medicine, natural history of disease, theory of evolution, epidemiology, concepts of causation, including the germ theory. The glorious era of parasitology, spurred by the pioneering works of Manson, Ross, and others, established tropical medicine as a distinct discipline. In the 19th century, when the British Empire was in its full glory, Joseph Chamberlain, secretary for the colonies, who was convinced of investment in tropical diseases, which took its toll among the servants of the Raj. Trade, agriculture, and administration faced hurdles due to these diseases. Chamberlain viewed these as barriers to constructive imperialism. He realized that research in tropical medicine was vital to promote cause of the British Empire, even to the extent of it becoming a colonial science. Ronald Ross's work on malaria, undertaken in India, which fetched him the Nobel, further affirmed the place of tropical medicine and public health in India. These developments were a precursor to the setting of the School of Tropical Medicine in London in October 1899. The inaugural address emphasized the School of Tropical Medicine strikes effectively at the root of the principal difficulty of most of our colonies' diseases. It will make government more efficient. It will encourage commercial enterprise. It will conciliate and foster the natives. During a fundraising dinner for the new institution, Chamberlain added, "The man who would successfully grapple with this foe of humanity and find the cure for malaria." That time, malaria was a major problem. "The fever desolating of colonies and shall make the tropics livable for white men." It was a white man's burden. "Will do more for the world, more for the British Empire than the man who added a new province to the wide dominion of the Queen." With the fall of colonialism after the Second World War, the West dropped the baggage of tropical diseases. This was also precipitated by the attainment of better standards of living in the Western countries, which heralded the decline of this disease in the West. The discipline of tropical medicine, which reached its peak during the British Raj, lost its place of pride among the developed countries, being gradually replaced by travel medicine in these countries. So ultimately, it all boils down to power play, dominion, colonialism. Disease is an extra weapon. What is past for the West, it is present for the East. And we can ill afford to ignore this. This is the sad part of it. Our doctors are still blindly copying the West, which has dropped the baggage of these endemic diseases, this public health, this epidemiology, this tropical medicine, and they are interested in high-tech medicine and anything which affects them and which may be compared to that or endemic disease. I will show the figures are of a greater, we ignore them and rush after those. However, developing countries still struggling with the control of these diseases. These are the earlier diseases which the West had controlled: malaria, typhoid, diarrhea, dysentery. We can ill afford to ignore these as a major public health problems. Unfortunately, with the changing times, low priority has been given to our own public health problems. We should pay heed to what the British realized centuries ago, that is, control of endemic diseases would lead to better governance and economic development. Regrettably, globalization and market forces are pulling bright researchers in the opposite direction, with the glitz and glamour associated with diseases of the affluent instead of diseases of the poor. Research in developing countries are mostly funded by private agencies who are more interested in clinical trials for newer drugs and vaccines, which are easier to carry out as well as more profitable, rather than tackle the root causes. You see, this research is now only one virus and one vaccine. In between, there are a lot of gaps, which are the root cause of the disease problems, which cannot have simplistic solutions. So we are neglecting that. We are neglecting the field epidemiology work. Regrettably, globalization and market forces are pulling bright research in the opposite direction, as I said. The Rockefeller Foundation, which earlier supported schools of public health, later funded clinical epidemiology training programs with a view to make clinicians competent to carry out clinical trials. They just neglected public health because public health is not very glamorous. It is field work, it is slow, painstaking, trying to get at the root cause. But they took a shortcut and started training clinicians to carry out clinical trials with such high pressure promotion and involvement of many interest groups, particularly big pharmaceutical industries with their own profit motives and commitment to the shareholders. It is unlikely that tropical medicine public health will regain its pride of place. The price we are paying already for this neglect, the present silent pandemics. What is the price we are paying for this? Just from India, we are holding a very poor scorecard on a prevalent endemic disease which kill far greater than numbers than the recently COVID-19 pandemic ever did during the peak of the second wave. Daily, day in and day out, we are losing more people to preventable endemic diseases, which I call the silent pandemics. These deaths are occurring day in and day out without media hype and population level panic, which even one case of monkeypox or without a single death generates. We are going into panic because of the media hype. One monkeypox case detected in the airport. We are going panic, not a single death outside Africa. We are going into panic. Whereas day in and day out, we are losing thousands of people to preventable disease. Even without complete data, we don't have even complete data for the diseases which are killing us. Even without complete data, due to poor monitoring of the neglected endemic diseases, just two illustrative examples will drive home the point and reveal our complacency around our local public health problems. First example is tuberculosis. Tuberculosis alone kills 1,400 Indians every day. Imagine 1,400 young people dying from tuberculosis, which is treatable, which has a drug, which has a so-called vaccine also, which never worked. But now again, they are trying to recycle the vaccine, which never worked. Recently, there was talk out. This is very important. Many people, the media is silent, except for few reports. There was recently stock out of anti-tuberculosis drugs for months on end, 4 months, 5 months. The whole period is 6 months. The TB patients going to the TB centers are not getting drugs for 4 months recently. This interrupted the treatment of many TB patients, which can have severe consequences as this increases the risk of mortality as well as give rise to drug resistance and extra drug resistance tuberculosis, which has a high mortality of more than 10-20% and which can communicate to other person the resistant strains. Imagine TB treatment is there, drug supply is not there in the government depots. Patient cannot get, poor patient coming from distance, and they will drop out and they will spread. In the health advisors to the government of India and the media should have hyped this to draw attention and mobilize support to get the TB drugs forthwith without a single day's delay. Why there was no hype? Why they were, when we are sending everything, PP and everything to Africa during the pandemic, why not our own TB patients are getting the TB drugs which are available? Why don't mobilize the global community to supply TB drugs? Why there should be a shortfall of TB drugs, which is essential, which kills daily 1,400 in India? Instead, such real emergencies in the present got little attention from them, and instant contingency plans were being made for future pandemics, real or imagined, were being worked out to the extent of proposing stringent Public Health Act to enforce stricter measures of future pandemic control. That first Niti Aayog experts, they made a report that first 100 days we have to very strict, one case of monkeypox, one case of Nipah virus. Here 1,400 people dying of TB daily and 4 months no drugs. Why no emergency meeting for this? Why there is a proposal for a strict Public Health Act for 100 days, maybe more strict than the lockdown and quarantine we had, and that's what they implied. That these are the lessons learned in COVID, that first 100 days we have to be more strict. Why more? Without, we are losing inside, we are losing so many people. Why wait for something to come from outside? In fact, stricter acts are required to fix accountability for those responsible for interruption of supplies of anti-TB drugs. Available science is there, available technology is there, patient is in front of you. Why the drug is not reaching the patient for 4 months at end? This must have caused a long cohort all over India of people transmitting the resistant strains, which are more difficult to treat. Similarly, we have an ongoing poignant pandemic among children. In India, 4,000 children die daily due to preventable disease. Even at the height of the COVID, 4,000 deaths did not occur from COVID. However inflated, anybody with RT-PCR, anybody dying comorbidities, just stretching it and inflating the figures also did not reach 4,000 a day without any, and these may be underreported, but data shows that 4,000 children die from preventable disease in India daily. Shouldn't TB and child death be declared a bigger public health challenge in India than imaginary future pandemics? We are waiting for pandemic X. Here we are losing people. Besides, there are many others. There are other silent pandemics in different parts of the country which can make COVID pandemic with an infection fatality rate of 0.03 to 0.05% up to the age of 69 years pale into insignificance. Road traffic accident kills 400 young people daily. Typhoid, which is endemic in India, has a mortality of 1 to 3% in treated cases and 10 to 30% untreated. In remote areas, we don't have health services. We don't know how many we are losing from typhoid. Among Asian countries, 70% of dengue cases occur in India, and we don't have figures of dengue. How many people are dying of dengue? People die, young people die from dengue, hemorrhagic fever. They don't have, beds were not available recently from dengue. Scrub typhus with a mortality of 1 to 3% in treated and 30% in untreated. Misdiagnosis is common in scrub typhus. 30% is endemic in many pockets of India. Leptospirosis with a case fatality rate of 5 to 15%. After every monsoon, we have cases of leptospirosis. Rabies, most important. Now we are worried of a zoonotic of Nipah or Ebola or some bird flu of 20%, one case, one death in human. There is a panic all over the world. Just listen to this. Rabies has a 100% mortality, and as per the WHO estimates, every year in India, between 18,000 to 20,000 Indians die from rabies. Let this sink in. 18,000, 20,000 every year, we are losing Indians to rabies. And you have got stray dogs all over you in India, in the streets. We are not afraid. Children are mauled and 20,000 people are dying of rabies. And we are worried of some Nipah virus, some exotic virus. According to estimate, this is a WHO estimate, far more than Nipah, Ebola, or bird flu, or any other fancy viruses that have killed since their discoveries. If Mpox, a self-limiting disease in the healthy, can be declared a public health emergency of international concern by the WHO, it is a wonder why your endemic diseases are not qualifying for this title. When we have so much unfinished business on our hands, why, like Don Quixote and Sancho Panza, wait for pandemic X to strike us? This luxury we can leave to the West. What the future should focus based on the principles of epidemiology, public health, and health economics. We should focus on our own research agenda. We have enough on our plate rather than wait for some future. Own research agenda based on a public health priorities. For that, we need proper monitoring and surveillance of all our endemic diseases, not one disease in isolation to create panic. Lessons from the COVID-19 pandemic, during which daily cases and deaths were being monitored, can be adapted for other endemic diseases. Then we will know that there are much more problems. We should also encourage cost, benefit, and economic analysis of the various interventions before rushing to implement drastic measures with little evidence, like the new policy with first 100 days and then strict Public Health Act. They are strict. Where is the analysis that these work, and where is the cost benefit, economic analysis? Doctors practicing in our country should take full advantage of our research opportunities provided by the vast variety of diseases prevalent regionally. As one of the founders of tropical medicine, Sir Patrick Manson stated, the tropical practitioner enjoys opportunities for original research and discovery far superior in novelty and interest to those at the command of his fellow inquirer in the well-worked field of European and American research. We have got the most research, but we still rush for New England Journal of Medicine, Lancet, and see those insipid papers there and some insipid abstract mathematical models, and we go into panic in the East. Here we have got so much diseases. We are just, they are not noting, we are not noting. We should note. These words from the doyen, Patrick Manson has said that tropical practitioner in the tropical country has got much more on these to learn from rather than the Western doctors. These words from the doyen should inspire researchers from India. If we do not take the lead in research in pandemics and continue our dependency on grants from international donors with their own conflicts of interest and short-sightedness, we will be facilitating medical imperialism till eternity. Now we are in the era of medical imperialism till eternity, and it will be confirmed once the pandemic treaty comes. While our population will continue suffering from a silent pandemics, ignored by the media and the health policy makers. The short-sighted mathematical models from the Imperial College in London, we are still controlled by that London. Even the British Empire is no more, but we are still their empire. Imperial College in London, the mathematical model which shut down the world with immense collateral harm should be a warning for us. We have enough first-hand experience and expertise dealing with communicable diseases day in and day out, which should make the West look to us for direction rather than we dancing to their tunes. Jai Hind. It is high time we became medical leaders. Thank you.